about companionship. Our species seeks it, depends on it, yearns for it. 30 years ago, companionship could be found in the traditional trajectory of success and social membership, in marriage, children, family, and a sense of home central to giving the individual the sense of roots, recognition, and hope which we also need. Life is tough, but it is noticeably made easier when we struggle hand in hand with a partner, guiding our children or reminiscing about the past. But what happens when that trajectory becomes more long-winded, complicated, and inaccessible? What happens when you need to get from A to B, but that which is meant to get you there doesn't? When a dog and human being lock eyes, you will notice that the dog is always the first one to break eye contact. Oxytocin is produced in both the human and in the dog when this happens. Dogs are ultimately helping to soothe the wounds of a psychologically demanding modern life. It is no coincidence that millennials are earning and faring less than their parents, while simultaneously depending more on pets as companions. Millennials also took over from baby boomers as the most pet-owning generation. Approximately 50% of American millennials are pet owners. This number would likely be just as high in the UK if landlords were not so omnipotent. It should also be noted that 42% of millennials have willingly taken on debt on behalf of their pets. However, importantly, this debt is not accrued because, well, millennials are spending more money on their pets, but rather because younger generations have less discretionary income than older generations. This increasing obsession with dogs particularly, but generally with pets, has me asking the question, what is it that makes us yearn for this companionship, specifically of canines? Our relationship with dogs is a complicated one, and it is one that doesn't seem to, at least at face value, make a lot of sense. But I think that looking at it, we can say a lot about the state of society. Dogs have been our companions for over 40,000 years. However, for the vast majority of this time period, dogs have been used by humans for only practical and survival uses. Dogs as companions is only a very, very recent development. Dogs have only been known to be humans' companions for about 3,000 years now. And it was around this time that dogs began to emerge as a form of class and status symbol. This was largely kept to small, little manicured lapdogs, treated with love and affection by members of the aristocracy. They were amusing playthings, but also a symbol of leisure time and of wealth attributed to that leisure time. However, most dog breeds were still used for purely practical purposes. The agrarian context made this human-canine bond pretty simple. Evolutionarily speaking, over time, dogs' brutality was muted as humans became their main source of food and protection from the cold. Humans used dogs for hunting, herding, tracking, and spotting. It was industrialization which ruined this mutual dependence. As urbanization and technologization altered the social landscape, more and more people were induced to move into cities where money was being made and where jobs were, and dogs were inevitably not needed in the context of factory work. Small, cramped, unhygienic, and underdeveloped accommodation did not obviously have space for dogs. Importantly, there was no longer a practical use for dogs. However, this is when, increasingly, dogs as companions began to take on a whole new role. The Industrial Revolution caused substantial and dramatic change, the kind of change which made existence highly precarious and uncertain. Family dynamics altered, the demise of the largely extended family suddenly became the nuclear family. Households became smaller. It is no wonder that dogs took on a new role for those who could afford them, or merely looked out for the strays around them. I only make reference to this history because I think it is integral to understanding why we are so obsessed with dogs today, especially looking at dogs as no longer serving that practical survival need which humans had for them, and becoming pets, that is, household members with no functional use. The The symbolism of dog ownership. What does having a dog symbolize to an outsider? Well, similarly to how the aristocracy and wealthy would use small lapdogs in order to symbolize their wealth, a dog now most definitely has a social purpose, a symbolic purpose to its owner and those who come in contact with that owner. Having a dog is increasingly a hefty expense. We know that in society and in all forms of social contact, status is paramount to how humans interact and understand the world around them. It's how we understand the institutions that we function within. It's how we make sense of our place in this world. Dogs are increasingly becoming that status symbol, and this is especially so for millennials and Gen Zers. I think this is interesting in looking at how younger generations are being denied access to the traditional, conventional forms of social status. Home ownership, having children, having a stable, steady job, having an income that increases over time with experience in a position, being a specialist for the rest of one's working life, early retirement. Having a dog represents a new, innovative way of demonstrating one's social standing. When we see somebody with a dog, we see not just them with their dog, we see that they have stability. They must have enough disposable income or a high enough credit score in order to be able to afford the medical costs and the increasing organic wellness diet that dogs have. Dogs also symbolize a form of responsibility for something that isn't you. It demonstrates a maturity which is valued in seeking out partners and seeking out friendships. The treatment of dogs as people in this sense is definitely a very modern phenomena. In Spain recently it was announced that dogs are now going to be treated as humans when it comes to divorce proceedings. Pope Francis also recently scolded Catholics and modern individuals for choosing dogs over having children and reproducing. There is a lot of divide when it comes to this dog-human relationship, especially in looking at why it is that younger generations are so obsessed with pet ownership and whether this has to do with A, the society around them, or B, with us just not being very good at commitment or not very good at expenses, not wanting to have children because we are so self-interested. And I think that this is where I would really like to contribute something to the discussion if it is being had. In a rather vehement opinion piece, a journalist wrote that this new dog craze represents a growing breed of young people opting for pets over kids as the burden of raising a tiny human is losing its appeal for commitment-phobic, cash-strapped, travel-obsessed, or simply career-prioritizing millennials. Fertility rates are dropping. More women than ever before are getting pregnant for the first time in their 30s as opposed to in their 20s. The commodification of individualism has really taken the world by storm since the 1980s. I would agree with the author of this piece, who happens to be a millennial with a stable journalistic job and its high salary, that younger people are opting more so for pets than they are for children. However, I would disagree on the reason for this. The role of pets in making modern life bearable when people are unable to. The fact that 92% of Gen Z claim that pets reduce their anxiety, their stress, and their sense of loneliness is very telling about the state of modern society. Our forms of communication and relationship building have altered. Work is also increasingly done in isolation or in very controlled settings, which make no place for real, genuine human communication beyond that of commodifying one's time. We are workaholics and working machines. Everything has to be commodified, including a lot of the time our relationship to our pets, who are ever more becoming viral and being used for social media clout and as a form of extra income. Yet what I think that this overall symbolizes is not that younger generations are afraid of commitment. It's not just that younger generations are looking for an easy way out of having to have children and can't pay, God forbid, tuition fees. The modern dream is becoming less and less compelling. As anti-work sentiment increases, it is likely that a lot of disdain and resentment is going to increase. Human reason necessitates us to look to the future. We have foresight, and in having foresight, we find a meaning for our life and for what we are doing. Our actions have purpose. If we know that in the future we are going to be able to own a home, we are going to be able to provide for our children successfully and well, we are going to have a job that is not going to be on the same wage as we are now, but on a higher wage. These things give our actions in the present the purpose, the vehemence which they need. So when those dreams and those goals are no longer achievable, what is the alternative for a younger generation? For me, pets represent an achievable dream. They represent the ability to project oneself into the future, knowing for certain that A, you will be able to give this pet a good and fulfilled, meaningful life, and B, that you will be able to ultimately afford this life. It is the best of both worlds. A dog is a status symbol and is added responsibility, which only somebody who is mature, who is stable and financially capable can commit to. And secondly, unlike home ownership, early retirement, and the hope that your parenting doesn't produce one of the world's many sons of Sam, it is a viable aspiration. It is an achievable goal, not only to get a dog or pet, but essentially to give it a good and fulfilling life. When the future is so uncertain and bleak for so many of us, it is this achievable dream that can give us hope and meaning. A bit melodramatic, I know, but I think the important tenet in that should be thought of. The simple innocence of the dog or of a pet in general, quite childlike, is appealing. It takes us back to our childhood, a childhood of innocence, a childhood of trust. A Greek philosopher of Cynic philosophy, Diogenes believed that we had much to learn from dogs. Humans live in pure self-interest, hypocrisy, and artificiality. Dogs, on the other hand, have much to teach humanity. They live for the present. Their instincts tell them who is friend and who is foe. According to Diogenes, it gives an honest bark at the truth. It was believed that humans had a lot to learn from dogs insofar as improving our society, and this is where an interesting argument comes in. There are unintentional benefits to our obsession with dogs. News is quickly spreading that workplaces and offices are introducing new pet-friendly policies. Some are even reducing office hours and giving their employees more time to spend with their furry friends. A noticeable characteristic of modern life is that we have always been obliged to accommodate its demands as opposed to it accommodating ours. It provides a serendipitous opportunity. What if modern life was made more hospitable for our canine friends? For instance, flexible working hours, more understanding of the emotional advantages of having a pet, of having something to love and cherish. Dogs require more open green spaces in order to exercise and live as dogs. Ironically, the changes that are gradually being made in order to make modern societies more dog and pet friendly will have these same outcomes in making modern society more child friendly. So there are of course pros, but there's also the negative side of this. Humans are inclined to personify their furry friends, but this has also led to the anthropomorphization of our furry friends. We have attributed human characteristics to particularly dogs, and this often means that our dog is sacrificing a lot more of itself than otherwise would be the case. Dogs, and all animals in fact, that are kept in a domestic setting are captives. They are not free in the way that we'd like to think or oftentimes refuse to think about. Overall, our relationship to our dogs or our pets is a very one-sided, asymmetrical one, which no human being would ever tolerate. This is when the problem comes in, especially when dogs particularly are increasingly replacing humans as companions and as one's cherished loved ones. It says a lot about the state of our society. It says a lot about the unrealistic expectations we place on other human beings, particularly in the sense that we are so increasingly in contact with our furry friends that we don't really have to engage with the world, with its compromises, with symmetrical relationships, with relationships in which one is not completely reliant and dependent on the other. Young people are being exposed to a virtual world of rejection and failure greater than their parents. The dating world is brutal, the job market immensely competitive. The appeal of going home to a dewy-eyed, lovable canine who is both undeniably loyal and all-loving outweighs going home to more human chaos, to fighting, to a stressful relationship, to something that is not going to adore and love you as soon as you walk in the door. At least for me, and I don't even have a dog. What I'm trying to get at is that it is inevitable that animals are playing an increasingly more important role in our lives. If we look at the example of Michael Jackson and his relationship to Bubbles the chimpanzee, we can see that anomie, that isolation, that a feeling of not belonging in this modern world which we cannot keep up with is contributing so negatively to our relationships, to our in-person and human relationships, that we are seeking out alternatives, viable alternatives, alternatives that are achievable, that make life worthwhile. So I think rather than ridiculing dog moms or dog dads or what have you, it would be better to take a look at the society at large. I think it says more about the species than it does about the dog owner, the pet owner, Michael Jackson. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, I would be most thrilled if you would subscribe, if you would like, and please leave a comment to help me with engagement. I love hearing your comments, and yes, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in the next one.